it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, ChicagoJazz.com. We are here with Henry Johnson, the legendary guitarist from Chicago. I had to say that because I knew he'd start laughing. This is our feature interview for February 2019. 2019. I can't believe I'm saying 2019 already.
We're here.
We have landed. Henry and I have been talking over the years about doing something like this. I'm so glad that we actually have you and we've pinned you down. You are a very busy guy these days. You've got a lot of stuff going on. You've always had a lot of stuff going on. So I really want to delve into all of the different people you have performed with. He has toured with Ramsey Lewis, Joe Williams, Nancy Wilson, just to name a few. But before we even get into all of that, why don't we talk a little bit about you growing up and how you got into guitar? Because I think a lot of people know, somewhat of the people that you've played with, but I don't know how many people actually learned or know about how you got into guitar and what inspired you. Now, you were born in Chicago, and then we were talking off camera a little bit. You were going back and forth between Memphis and Chicago. What's the story behind that?
Well, my grandparents were from Memphis, so we would go down and visit them sometimes. And right after President Kennedy got assassinated, we went down there and we stayed down there for about like 6 or 7 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that because you felt more comfortable that your parents did?
Yeah, it was a lot of stuff going on, and so we went down there and we stayed down there for a while. And during that time is when I got involved with the guitar. I had when I was in junior high school, I started in the band, and I wanted to be a trumpet player, but they didn't have any trumpets left. So in order to be in the band, it was either bass clarinet, oboe, or clarinet. And I just said, okay, well, clarinet is it. Bass clarinet, that's cool, too weird looking.
Right, yeah.
And then oboe, I don't see anybody playing that. So I ended up playing clarinet. But that brought me to my teacher at that time. And incidentally, that guy's still living. Paul Meacham was the guy who actually taught me how to read music, all of us. And he was like a graduate of he had went to several different schools.
Yeah.
But he came to our school because we didn't have anybody to run the music program. And he came in and ran the music program, and he taught all of us how to read music. And he came up with his own way. He realized that every student processed information differently. So he would sit with you and figure out how you process information. And he had these weird things of telling you how to count, how to look at music, but always trying to connect it to what you hear. Wow. So he would play. So he introduced us to the classical music of Tchaikovsky and all of that. But it was based on you being able to hear it. So when you were looking at the paper, you were actually deciphering what was on the paper and turning it into what it sounds like.
That's amazing to actually have the foresight for a teacher like that.
Yeah.
To be able to do that, because I mean, how incredible was that to develop your ear that way, right?
We didn't know it was happening.
No, but I mean, think about it,
Yeah, and then on lunch break, we would go in there into the band room, and he would be playing. He played piano and trumpet, and he would be playing all of the jazz stuff.
Oh, really?
So he'd be playing piano trios, Aragon, all this stuff. He was exposing us to that, even though we didn't even know that's what it was.
Wow. So that's really where you got your first taste of jazz, and you didn't even know it was happening.
He took me to my first live jazz concert, which was the University of Illinois big band came to Memphis and gave a concert, and he took all of us there. And at that time, the soloist there was Cecil Bridgewater, the trumpet player.
Oh, yeah.
And I always tease him about it, Now I'm telling him how much older he is than I am, But that band, once I saw a live big band, that hooked us on jazz.
Yeah.
And in the meantime...
But you were playing clarinet then, right?
I was playing clarinet.
You're hooked, but you're hooked because you're playing clarinet, so you're probably watching the sax players.
I'm watching the sax players and the trumpet players and envying them.
Yeah.
But then one of my closest personal friend at the time he had a guitar that was laying around his house all the time, so we picked it up and just started learning chords and things on it. And within probably 6-7 months, we were both learning things off of recordings. So
just because your ears developed.
They were developing, but we didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, what they were calling, what they call transcribing, all that stuff. We didn't know that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
So I would just take a stack of 45s and just, go through them, learn all the guitar parts on them. And we didn't have a way to slow anything down. There was no computers or software. Right. You had to use your ears. And that developed the ears to the point where they could hear almost anything at any speed. And so I would just go through this stack of 45s. And then the next year when I was in junior high school, I joined this R&B band. Because
you've never had a gig. You've never had a gig. Nothing. You never had a lesson on guitar or anything, and you learned all these tunes.
Yeah.
Just by how did you figure out where to put your fingers?
I just
by ear.
Well, my ear had developed. I didn't realize it had developed to where it could hear the timbre of the strings. So when I would put my hand up here, I could hear that. Oh, that's on the second string, but I didn't really know that I was doing that.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
So all my favorite players then were Steve Cropper and all those guys. So I came up exposed to all kinds of music, not just jazz, but R&B and everything, and even gospel music there. So after, while I was playing in that band, I was also playing in a group that played in church every Sunday, in different churches every Sunday. So I learned gospel music too. But all of this is happening when you're like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
It's just music to you.
Well, and you're also having fun.
Yeah, because that was a big part of it.
Nobody's making you do something. I mean, how many students say, all right, go transcribe this solo. You're like, oh, God, oh, man. Oh. You didn't think, you're just like, hey, man, I want to learn this tune. And you would just learn it, right?
Yeah, it was not equated with an assignment or work or anything like that. It was just part of what I love to do.
Yeah.
So, they would say, okay, well, for this rehearsal, we got to do these kind of tunes. I said, okay, well, what's the tune? So one time, the bass player in that band, he brought this record, and he said, you're really good at learning all these solos for all of these things. I bet you can't learn any of this. So the record he brought, he said, I'm going to let you take this home. So I took the record home. It was an album, and it happened to be a Wes Montgomery album.
Oh.
And so,
Is that the first time you heard Wes, basically?
First time I heard Wes. And after I was listening to that, and I was like, what in the world is he doing? I didn't know what an octave was or anything like that. Yeah, so to me, I said, he got to have some sort of effect on this guitar. He can't be, just doing this on his own. And, so the next week when I went to rehearsal, he said, you going to give me my record back? I said, I need it a little longer. He said, yeah, you're not going to figure out any of that stuff. And so eventually, it was his dad's record, and the next rehearsal after that, he said, man, you got to give my record back. My dad wants his record back. So my mom went out, and we went to the record store, and I got my own, a couple of Wes albums myself. And everybody was on those albums. I started listening to them too. So it just bloomed into, all a different record
kind of went collection. Down the wormhole, right? So you're listening to the piano player, and then you're learning about who he played with and the drummer and all that stuff.
Yeah, and see, at that particular time, I was still listening to R&B because, Sly and the Family Stone was a popular group that just hit.
Sure.
So you're going to be affected by all that music of your age group, but also my mom and dad, came up, with Count Basie and all that. So I was hearing all that stuff. Joe Williams, I was hearing all that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And then on television, every television show had their own orchestra, which had all jazz guys in it.
Yeah.
So when you turn on the Tonight Show, you're looking at one of the great jazz guitar players or horn players or whoever. Tonight Show had Clark Terry on it. Every night, Clark Terry got it to solo. And then another band had Joe Pass as the guitarist.
Yeah.
Herb Ellis was a guitarist. So you're looking at all the great jazz people right there on a daily basis. It was indoctrinated into our lives.
Yeah.
So you learn that music by osmosis. But as I continued with this R&B band in Memphis, we got a call saying, we need to learn this music. And I said, okay, well, it was serious because all of us went to rehearsal and we had to all learn this music.
It was for
together.
a gig, a specific
gig.
It
was
for
a specific gig, and it turns out it was Isaac Hayes.
Really?
Yeah. So Isaac Hayes' first record had came out. He didn't have a band. And he lived in Memphis.
And you guys had played some, so somebody knew who you guys were?
We had been playing like all of the R&B clubs around Memphis, so we had gotten up to be pretty popular. And so we were the first people that he called.
Wow.
So that's why they were
panicking. You were on tour with Isaac Hayes?
Not tour, just that one gig.
That one gig.
In Memphis.
Yeah.
Which he still owes me $30 for. But I was underage, so I had to have a note to even be in the club.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like? Because that was like his first album, right? I mean, he had some
it was
hits
his first
off of
album,
that thing.
Hot Butter Soul.
Yeah. Wow.
And I had to learn all of the music off.
And you're like 14, 13, 14?
14, yeah.
Man.
But see, now people look at younger teenagers, and they say, if they see us teenagers playing music, oh, so he's a prodigy or something like.
Right.
When I was coming up, all of us were playing music at 13 and 14 years old professionally.
Yeah.
Because it was indoctrinated into the public school system. So many of the great musicians all came out of, they were products of the public school system.
Yeah. How important do you think that was? I mean, obviously hearing you talk about this and everything, but the thing that I'm getting from you too is that, and I don't know if this is the case these days, it seems like you had a very strong will to do something. And it was like nothing because you were having fun. You put the band together. You guys are jamming as a band. You guys are playing gigs. How many 13, 14, 15-year-old kids nowadays even has the forethought to think about actually getting repertoire together, practicing, jamming, and going and getting gigs? I don't think there's that many. No. And I wonder if it's because of the way you came up with everything just all in your environment the whole time, and it's just normal. Right?
I'm pretty sure that's it, because when I came up, we didn't have there weren't divisions in music. So on one radio station, we heard all artists.
Oh, it wasn't a jazz station, R&B,
there was no
rock,
jazz station or anything like that. B.B. King had a radio show on because he wasn't quite famous yet, and so
he's from Memphis, right?
He's from the South, and his radio show was in Memphis.
Okay.
And it was on this station called WDIA. And I used to listen to his radio show. But he was playing other blues artists and stuff on there as well. But he was a big proponent of, he'd be playing big band stuff. So some of his early recordings, they're jazz.
Well, he had a big band, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he had big band arrangements and stuff like that. But we heard the Beatles, we heard Wes Montgomery, Ramsey Lewis, we heard all that music was on one radio station. So it was like a smorgasbord. You get to hear the stuff and decide whether you like it. It wasn't about somebody's going to expose you to just this.
Right.
So you don't have a steady diet of just that. You get to choose the music that you like based on what you hear.
Yeah. Well, and it's all together. Nobody is trying to market it to you in a certain genre. And then you get that thing in your head like, oh, I hate that genre. I'm not even going to check that out on that station.
Exactly.
It was all just right there in front of you.
Yeah, nobody could tell you that, okay, well, I heard this one song. If this is, in other words, if you heard some jazz songs, you said like, man, if this is jazz, I don't want to ever hear that again. But, you don't realize that it's totally, many forms of jazz, like it's many forms of rock and everything else.
Yep.
So you might hear that particular artist and not like them, but to just cast out the whole genre, that's not, you wouldn't do that if you were exposed to all of it.
Well, and also the way you came up, and I talk about this with younger players too when I'm doing interviews with them. They're exposed to music if they grew up in the 80s or they grew up in the 90s. They're exposed. All of them were in rock bands. All of them were in R&B things. All of them were this. All of them were that. Then they got exposed to jazz somehow, and they're totally into jazz as well. But all of those different styles fold into their playing. And it sounds exactly the same thing that happened to you, because I can't imagine. I've seen you perform a million times, and you're not just up there. If you decide you're going to play little R&B things or things like that in the middle of your set, this is Henry Johnson. This isn't like, I am now going to play a classic jazz set for you this evening. It's like, no, this is my group. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to play some of this. I'm playing some, because it's Henry Johnson. You're not thinking of it as a category.
Yeah, I think that all people, all artists, regardless of what they are, they're a culmination of all their experiences. That's what makes them them.
Yeah.
you know. So if you talk about Maroon 5, what is Maroon 5? Maroon 5 is going to be a culmination of all those guys' experience, which brought them to who they are. Mm-hmm. You know, your choices that you make is what makes you your musical personality.
Right. It makes it your voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the hardest thing, too, is finding your voice. Now, when you're 14, 15, I mean, were you still kind of like playing licks? Were you playing because you've learned so much stuff off the record, or were you starting to find your own voice in your playing at that point? Because it's pretty early to figure that out.
Well, you know, the whole thing about finding your voice, sometimes you don't realize that you already have your voice and it's only going to be yours.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
good
like,
or bad.
you know, I was older when I finally realized that, you know, like, okay, this is who I am, that's it. But, you know, like guys like George Benson were around me and they were teaching you to be accepting of yourself.
Yeah.
Because they had learned early that, you know, he learned, I can't be Wes. I
Right.
can't be Grant Green. So, you know, those bodies are already taken up. So the only thing I can be is the best me.
Yeah.
And so when you start accepting yourself, then you start accepting that, okay, there's something to me. You know, I can be really good me.
Yeah.
But then you realize is my DNA is only mine. There's nobody else out there that can be me either. So you kind of look at it at both hands and you says, okay, what's the positive on both hands? Then you stop trying to be anybody other than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's when you actually realize you do have a voice. It's just, you just don't realize it because you're not used to hearing it.
Yeah.
But once you get used to hearing it, if you listen to yourself, I taped myself a lot back then. And I was saying like, man, that doesn't sound like Wes Montgomery. That doesn't sound like George Benson. That doesn't, you know, it just sounds like me trying to sound like them.
Yeah.
If I stop trying to sound like them, I'm going to find me. And see, all of those guys like Dizzy, I was fortunate enough to be able to come up around those guys that were still alive.
Yeah.
And have the lessons from them about embracing your originality.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, but when you're younger and you're coming up, when did you start? I mean, did you go to school for music, or you just were playing and you just started playing? I doubt you went to school for music after we're talking.
No,
right?
I started at Indiana University Northwest, and after a year, I sat in with Jack McDuff, and he said, okay, my guitar player is leaving, so I'm going to need you. And that was my first road gig. So I left school to actually learn the music from the people who created it.
Yeah.
So that university was more valuable to me than something I was going to actually learn in school, because the people who created the music are the university.
So he heard you play, and he's just like,
I knew all of his music because I had been listening to his records for almost my life.
Oh, yeah.
So when I sat in with him, he asked me, what do you want to play? I said, well, we can play what you would normally call. He said, oh, really? And he called one of the tunes out, and I played it all, you know, and he just totally freaked out. So when I actually went with him, I knew, you know, 50% of his music already.
Yeah. And he was touring.
He was touring
a lot,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
that was when there was a lot of circuits, and I mean, those guys like that would go out.
Well, back then,
months, right?
Back then, I came up on the tail end of this. Back then, the gigs were 6 nights a week.
Oh, wow.
And so, so we would go into one city 6 nights a week, you know, for that whole week. And then the next city, we'd take that one day and drive to the next city and start the next
6
one.
nights.
So when you tour the whole country like that, you're going to be playing almost 100% of your time.
Wow.
So that's the way that Charlie Parker and them came up. Either they were playing or they were practicing to play.
Yeah.
And that's giving you're totally immersed in music, which makes you get a higher level quicker, because that's all you're doing.
Well, you're also being pushed by guys that are better than you too, right?
All
so
the time.
when you're playing with one of the masters, you got to play. And
they're not going to bring their level down. You have to rise to their level.
You know, the thing that I also think about back then as opposed to now is when you're playing, it's really difficult, I think, unless you're in that situation, to every single night, like, you can't have like, going through the motion night. It's got to be like you're on fire. There's places packed. You got to be blowing and it's on fire. And I don't think you can practice that. I think you need to get in a situation where you have this is it, otherwise you're getting fired. So you better just blow and you better be on top of it, right?
You can't practice that. You're absolutely correct. You can't practice that. You learn that from being with the masters, where when you step on stage, it's time.
Yeah.
It's all serious on stage. When you step on stage, you can have fun. Everybody's going to have fun. The audience is going to have fun. But you're all business, and you know that you have to give 101%.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's only the half pack, however many people in there, is you play to them as if there's like 100 people in there. If it's only 50 people in there, you still play to them like that.
Yeah. When were you in a situation? Was that the first situation that you were in, where all of a sudden you were like, "Whoa, this is heavy duty stuff here. I better not be looking at the the doorway or something. I better be thinking and like really playing here."
Yeah.
Because that gets exhausting too. I mean, until you get to the point where you're just used to doing it, it gets exhausting, right?
Yeah. Well, if you're doing it 6 nights a week, you're going to get used to it pretty quick, and you also get used to finding out what your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
Because great band leaders, they know what you're going to be able to do and what you're not going to be able to do. And Jack would focus on what I couldn't do.
Oh, really?
Oh,
so
yeah.
he'd push you.
I could not play fast tempos. I didn't understand how the mind works or any of that stuff. So we're in New Jersey, and back then we used to have to play Sunday matinees. So when you're doing your 6 nights a week, that one day you had to play a matinee, and then you had to come back and play 2 other shows.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that matinee had everybody was coming in to just hear Jack because he knew everybody. So this particular club, the bandstand was behind the bar.
Oh, okay, yeah, one of those.
So you're higher than everybody else in the room, and you're the people that are working the bar, they're underneath you. And so, but there was a lot of clubs like that back then. So they could look at you, and they're looking up at you, and they see you all the time. So there's no way to escape anything, And he was this one particular tune, Jack would call. He had a samba version of "Long Came Betty." "Long Came Betty's got a lot of changes, so it's hard enough to
long form too. Man.
Yeah, it's hard enough to play at a medium tempo. To be playing it as a fast samba, it was hard, and every time I would get my butt kicked. So Jack knew this. So that particular afternoon, sitting at the bar was George Benson, the organ player Larry Young, the great guitar player Jimmy Ponder. It was just tons of musicians there. And Jack calls his tune and totally embarrasses me,
Oh, man.
So, it's like I had my tail between my legs and stuff like that. We went on break. And I talked to George, and I said, man, you played with this guy. How did you deal with these tempos and stuff like that? And that point, he took me to the club was packed. He took me into a little corner, and he started teaching me about the guitar, how it functions, how I can function, and start teaching me his techniques.
Wow.
Some of the techniques that he had perfected because of being in that situation.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, we became really great friends and mentors. He was my mentor for a long, long time.
He's the first guy then probably that
First
actually
one
showed you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I practiced what he taught me for 6 months, and 6 months later, I never had another problem playing tempos.
Yeah.
But I had to totally change the way that I was playing the guitar.
Isn't that amazing though? I mean, for somebody like George, and he wasn't as huge at that point, but he was well known. He was big, right?
This happened in 1976, so he was
so he
already on his way.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do any of that.
No.
He's still one of my best friends now.
Yeah. Just a giving person, right?
Yeah, I mean, he just loves guitar players, period. And he knew that I was in trouble because he saw it. He didn't even say anything, but he saw it.
He's like, come here.
And he probably thought, I was going to ask him anything. I asked him because I said, if it's anybody know how to deal with this, it's him.
Yeah.
Because he had to deal with it.
Yeah.
But 6 months after that, I never had another problem. I changed my technique and everything.
How long were you with Jack?
I was just with Jack a year and a half.
Okay. And then you went from with Jack to who is the next one? Because obviously, when you're doing something with Jack and your name is getting bigger and bigger, you're probably getting calls from other people and inquiries.
Well, the thing is, before I went with Jack, I was playing a lot of gigs locally. So this particular place we were playing at, all of the jazz artists, was a lot of jazz organists and stuff that was coming through. So I was playing with those guys too. Don Patterson used to live in the area. So him and Billy James would have a night that they would be playing. I got called to play with them, quite a few times. So I played with him and Groove Holmes, just a lot of jazz artists at that particular time. But once I went on the road with Jack, I started to, I moved to New York.
Okay.
So that particular thing, the first night in New York.
So you moved to New York and then you went out with Jack, or you moved?
I went out with Jack and then he lived in New York. So
you just moved there.
I just moved to New York. At that particular time. That was in 1976, and so he says, "Well, I'll have to deal with finding a place to live and whatever like that." But the first few nights I stayed with him. But the first night we drove from Chicago to New York.
Oh, God.
Because he had a trailer attached to a station wagon. And his organ and all our instruments would be in the trailer, and he would drag that trailer all everywhere we went.
The glamorous
so
tour.
We were driving everywhere. Anyway, we drove to New York, and by the time we got to New York, it was like 12:30 midnight, after midnight. And so we were still, wired. And after he dropped the trailer off, he said, "Man, let's go out and hang." Back then, they still had after-hour joints.
Oh, okay, like that go until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and so he knew about this after-hour joint. He says, "Well, let's go down to this place." I said, "Okay, fine." I took my guitar and stuff like that because they have music there and stuff like that. So I walk in, and there's a band playing and stuff like that, and there's a piano player. He's got a beard. I don't recognize anybody because I'm new there. And, the guy started playing, and then I got up and started playing. And he started playing, and I immediately recognized something about his playing. And it turns out it was Monty Alexander. Oh. And it was his first night in New York, too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He had just moved to New York, too. And so we met. We're still friends now. We still talk about that now. But, I didn't recognize the beard or anything like that. It was Monty Alexander.
Yeah.
And he had records out,
Sure. Yeah, he was touring.
He was from Jamaica. And so
did he move from Jamaica there? That's when he did that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
So it isn't, and at that point, in New York, you're probably running into everybody was there. Right?
Oh my God,
it was crazy.
Yeah, back then though, there was a lot of clubs in New York.
Yeah.
So you could make a living, like just playing the clubs in New York. It's not like it is now.
Right.
And when I found a place that was in a hotel in Times Square. Well, the Times Square in 1976 doesn't look anything like Times Square now.
No.
Back then, Times Square had like all these clubs, sex clubs and stuff. It was like the dirty part.
I was there in '91, and it was like that. So it wasn't like it is now either. So yeah, they cleaned it up fast.
Oh, they totally cleaned Times Square up. It was but then it was cool for me because I could go anywhere I wanted to go.
Sure.
It was still a lot of clubs in the area and stuff like that too. So it was cool. I stayed in New York for like 5.5 months.
Are you meeting guys and going out on the road and things like that?
I was still going out on the road with Jack, but I was still meeting all of the guys there.
Yeah.
Because I would see them all the time. I was walking from place and I ran into Hubert Laws. He was on a bicycle with a backpack, and I recognized his face and I said, "Hubert Laws." He said, "Hey man, how you doing?" I said, "Well, where are you heading to, man?" He said, "I'm going to a recording session."
Yeah.
It's like you see everybody like that all the time.
Yeah. It was just a community. It was,
yeah.
Everybody was real well known in the jazz world probably, but that was the community in New York at that point.
Yeah, exactly. But then New York was expensive even back then, but then you rent control apartments and stuff like that. The space was small.
Yeah.
Too small from what I was used to in Chicago. So after being with Jack, I moved back to Chicago because while I was there, I realized that all the places in New York, I was still going to play anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I could still live in Chicago and still travel around the country. So when I moved back to Chicago, I was still touring with Jack.
Yeah.
I was still playing. And, we would go to New York and we'll still play the same clubs we did all the time. So I just said, okay, well, Ramsey Lewis stayed in Chicago. Why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
So I did.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me from doing anything.
Well, and I mean, and that's in the 70s, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even now, I mean, with the internet and everything else, it's completely different
yeah.
now. I mean, you don't have to be any. You can get on a plane in 2 hours. You're in Manhattan.
If you got a mobile phone, nobody knows where you are.
Right.
You just check in and say, okay, I'm supposed to do this at this time. Okay, that's where you could be in Timbuktu. Nobody knows. As long as you got a good signal, you're good.
That's right. That's right. So you're in now. You're back in Chicago. You're playing around town and everything. How did you hook up with Joe Williams first? I mean, how did that whole thing come about?
Well, after Jack, when I came back to Chicago, I was still working all the jazz clubs. A lot.
And there was a lot of them back then in Chicago.
Yeah, a whole lot of them, especially on the South Side. So I was still working a lot of those things too. So I would work, like there's so many people. Even now, I can't remember all of them. I have to write them down.
Yeah, right.
But what ended up happening is like I got a call from Donny Hathaway. And I wasn't familiar with all of his stuff, but I was familiar with, stuff he had done with Roberta and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls me up and he says like, oh, well, I need a guitar player. Can you come audition? I said, okay, fine, And so he tells me where it is. It's where he was living was on LaSalle and Division.
Okay.
And it was a place, the building is still there, but he lived on the 17th floor. And this was in the summertime on a hot day. It must have been about 86 degrees or something like that. And his elevator was out. So I'm dragging a guitar and a little amp up 17 flights of stairs. When I finally get up there, he has some music that he has, like on the table. He said, man, can you play this? I said, okay. And I just played, whatever was on the paper, whatever the tune was or something like that. And he said, play this one here. So I played that one, something like that. He said, okay, man, here's my manager's number. We're going to start going out like next week. That was the audition.
That was it.
That was the audition. But I had walked up 17 flights of stairs just for that, So it was, it was interesting. But I was with Donnie until he passed.
Okay. And you toured all over the world with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We toured a lot.
How many years?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
Before he passed.
Yeah.
So I was in the last band that he had.
And so through that connection, did you start to move up? I mean,
from that point, I did a concert with Donnie at the Park West, but we opened for Ramsey.
Okay.
And so that's where Ramsey actually saw me. I didn't know he saw me.
Yeah.
So.
Did Ramsey have like LD still in the band?
No, this particular band had his R&B, more R&B kind of stuff. And the particular album that he had out at the time was called Tequila Mockingbird. So he had, I forget the name, the guys in the band, but they're all on the records and stuff like that. And after that, I think the band had just gotten too big, and he wanted to go in another direction. He wanted to do less R&B.
Yeah.
So anyway, when Donnie passed, it was about like 3 months after Donnie had passed. I get a call again, and it says like, "Hi, this is Ramsey Lewis," and I thought it was one of my friends.
Oh.
And I said, "Man, get off the phone," So the phone rings again later, about 10 minutes later, and he said, "Hey man, don't hang up. It's really Ramsey Lewis." I said, "Really? What?" He said, "Look, I'm looking for a guitar player, and I heard that you were open,
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay, sure. He said, well, can you come down? I'm recording down at, I forgot the name of the studio now. It was a big studio.
Okay.
He said, I'm recording down here. Can you meet me down here tomorrow? I said, okay, fine. So I meet him at the studio and stuff like that, and they were in the middle of a take, so I just came in and sat down. And I met his road manager. And his road manager said, yeah, man, I'll have them talk to you after this take.
Yeah.
So once they finish the take and stuff, Universal Studios.
Oh, Universal. Okay.
Okay. So after the take, he came up and introduced himself. And he said, "Hey man, I'm Ramsey Lewis, and I know you're Henry Johnson." He said, "So anyway, I need you for this. We're gonna start touring in a week."
In a week.
Yeah. I said, "Okay. What do you need? You want to rehearse something like that?" He said, "No, I don't need no rehearsal. Your reputation precedes you." And he said, "You're hired." That was it.
Well, all right.
We never
No
rehearsed.
kidding.
We never rehearsed or anything. So I had to, now it's like
Now you got to learn the tunes.
I got a week to go and learn all this stuff, But I
How big of a group did he have then? Was it a quartet or something?
He had like 7 pieces, and then he reduced it down to a quartet.
Okay.
That was the new thing that he was doing.
So bass, drums, guitar, and piano?
Yeah. So at that particular point, I started working with him, and then I started meeting a lot of other people because we were on tour. And see, he was touring a lot then. So our first tour, we were out like for 3 months.
Wow. Every night, probably, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Gigs were 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Some a week.
Wow.
Still working 6 nights a week.
Yeah.
So you had plenty of opportunity to work on your stuff and work on your music every day. So you play music at night, and you practice on the music during the day. That was your job.
Yeah. And it actually paid.
Yeah, right, exactly.
What happened?
I don't know.